What's happening? Rob here, Old City Vapors, back with another edition of Weird Wednesday, number 48. Creeping up on the number 50 for Weird Wednesday. Who knows what that'll be? Anyway, back at it. Had a couple of weeks off. Haven't made videos for the last couple of weeks. One of the reasons I was sick for pretty much a full week, and this last week I just been playing catch up, trying to get everything caught back up, and doing some other projects in the works as well. Joined the Evo network, and we'll be doing a live show on that network, so that's something to look forward to. Anyway, went on there the other night and was all up in my creeper look, and it was a little unexpected thing, but hey, went on with my good buddy Robert, and chit-chatted about all kinds of crazy things. A little vaping, a little UFOs, a little conspiracy theory. Who knows, man? The show will just go in any direction at any given time. So you don't have to be a vapor to like it. You don't have to be a ghost hunter to like it. If you like a little bit of weirdness, keep an eye out for it. It's called Beyond the Fringe. Anyway, I'll put the link below to it so you can check it out. Anyways, this week's Weird Wednesday is going to be on the Tolomato Cemetery here in St. Augustine, Florida. St. Augustine. It is a old cemetery located here, kind of in the heart of downtown St. Augustine on Cordova Street. And like I say, man, it's old. It's not an active cemetery. And when I mean active, I mean people aren't still being buried there. The last people that were buried there were in the, I believe, late 1800s. This cemetery is like the former grounds of an Indian village, and there was part of a cemetery on those grounds, and it was noted on a map of St. Augustine dating back to 1737 or something like that. So anyways, like I say, these folks have been there quite a long time. A lot of the markers, gravestones, gravesites or whatever, are unmarked. So who knows how old they are. A lot of them are marked. A lot of them have a lot of history. There's different people from different walks of life that are buried in this cemetery. It's a Catholic cemetery, but there are black slaves that were buried there. There's Indians that were buried there. There's people, soldiers from the Civil War, Revolutionary War. There's quite an array of different folks buried there. A lot of children buried here as well. Back in those days, you got sick, it was kind of, wasn't any, you couldn't run down to the walk-in clinic and get some medicine. You had to stick it out and hope you made it through whatever was ailing you. If not, they buried your ass in the ground somewhere. So yeah, it was kind of rough living back then. Back when I was a kid growing up, the cemetery there was just a little stone wall around it. You could just hop it, go in at any time. As a kid, I was known to frequent that spot occasionally. Nowadays, because of the fascination of some folks to vandalize cemeteries, it's now boarded with a chain link fence. They are, however, taking donations, trying to raise some money to get a really nice fence put up there with a gate that's locked. You can only access it legally on the third Saturday of each month from, I believe, 10 to 2, 10 to 3, something like that. So me and my wife went down there a couple of weeks back and did some filming. Like I say, it was in the daytime. We were there legally, playing tourist in St. Augustine. But it's been a long time since I've been in this cemetery, and it's a pretty fascinating place. A lot of history there. And it wouldn't be a Weird Wednesday if I didn't tell you about some of the strange creepiness that goes on there as well, which there seems to be plenty of. Ghost tours, all the ghost tours make a stop at this cemetery. I was there, I don't know, few weeks back doing a ghost box session. I was in the back by one of the fences right by some of the graves doing a ghost box session, and the the ghost tours, man, they were just, one would pull up, stop, talk for a minute, then the next one would pull up, then another one would pull up. People walking by, taking pictures. Um, and this was like at midnight, or actually I got there like 10:30 or so. I left about midnight, but yeah, it was just packed with people and people coming by, taking pictures and all. So it's kind of hard to get a quiet time at this cemetery. I may try to go at like 3 in the morning or something, and try to do a better ghost box session then, when there's not as much noise. Because like I say, it is right on Cordova Street, so cars driving by up in the front, people coming up to the gate and taking pictures, and the whole 9 yards. Cool place though. One little story that's not a ghost story, but kind of funny in a way. My stepdad told me a story when he was a kid, which he's like 87 now, so it was a long time ago for him even. Him and some other kids were down at the cemetery, and they rigged up a thing with a coat hanger, and put a jacket over it, made like to look like the headless horseman kind of guy. And said this old black woman was walking down the street. You can see where it's going right now, right? And the guy that was all rigged up jumped up, popped up from behind the wall, no head, doing this thing. And the poor old woman freaked out, took off, screaming, running down the road. And he said the funniest thing about it was, he said they kind of felt bad because they really scared the crap out of her. But he said the funniest thing about it was, she jumped out of her shoes. Yeah, they looked down and her shoes were standing right there where she first saw this headless apparition pop up behind the graveyard wall. Yeah, she took off running, left her shoes right there, and they all had a good laugh about it, and then kind of felt bad. Because now the poor lady probably didn't have any shoes, and she's probably, ain't no way in hell she was going back by the graveyard to go look for him. So I don't know if the poor old woman ever got her shoes back or not, but that's just one of the stories that's I've heard from days gone past there at the Tolomato Cemetery. So anyways, here's the video that I shot. It's kind of just rambling, just walking through the graveyard, looking at different headstones, markers, whatnot. I actually go in the chapel a little bit, and you can see what's in there. And I'll talk throughout it, so you don't just have to listen to me rummaging around, walking through the leaves and stuff. So anyways, that's it. Here we go, and have fun, hopefully. Alright, here is the sign right outside of the Tolomato Cemetery. It says, during the first Spanish period prior to 1763, this site was occupied by the Christian Indian village of Tolomato. With its chapel and burying ground served by Franciscan missionaries, the village was abandoned when Great Britain acquired Florida in 1777. Father Pedro Kemps, pastor of the Minorcan colonists who had come to St. Augustine after the failure of Andrew Turnbull's settlement at New Smyrna, obtained permission from the governor Patrick Tunyon to establish this cemetery for his parishioners. Father Kemps was buried here in 1790. 10 years later, his remains were re-entered into the new church, the present cathedral. The first bishop of St. Augustine, Augustine Fl, 1876, is buried in the mortuary chapel at the rear of the cemetery. The last burial here took place in 1892. So yes, quite an old cemetery, to say the least. Saying that for American standards. Over in, European lands, they have history over there that's just dwarfs ours even. But anyways, there you go. A little bit about it. Let's take a look at what is behind the chain link fence with the barbed wire to keep the little vandalizing cretins out in the later part of the evenings. So a little bit more about the Tolomato Cemetery. It's predominantly was a Catholic cemetery. It's located on Cordova Street in the heart of downtown St. Augustine, Florida, my hometown. It was the former site of Tolomato, a village of Indian converts to Christianity, and the Franciscan monks who ministered to them. The site of the village and the Franciscan mission is noted on a map of St. Augustine from dating back to 1737. So, like I say, the place is old, and the inhabitants in this cemetery, the people resting there, they've been there for quite some time. Um, the cemetery for the inhabitants of the village was also located on this grounds, with a portion of the cemetery set aside for former American black slaves that came from, their life as a slave in the Carolinas. Like I say, man, rough living back in those days for sure. Uh, the location of the Tolomato was just outside the city, across from the Rosario line, which was a defensive line that was constructed in the first Spanish period. It consisted of an earthen embankment, and it was planted with what some call Spanish daggers. I call them Spanish bayonets, along with many other locals here. And I can tell you, Spanish bayonets, to try to crawl through those, you think a briar patch is bad, Spanish bayonets will mess you up. I speak from experience with that. I remember when I was a kid, we had Spanish bayonets in my yard, on one end of the yard. I got a brand new football for my birthday. We're going out in the yard, had this big, huge yard. We're going to play football. I had that football, brand new football, for a matter of about 10 minutes before somebody gave it a good kick. It went into the Spanish bayonets, and then it became a flat ball instead of a football. So in 1763, Britain gained control of St. Augustine, and most of the Spanish population, of a whopping 3,100, left for Cuba, along with many of the Native American converts, and including the monks and the inhabitants of the Tolomato village. The British occupants, primarily Protestant, had no need for the wooden Catholic church, and they tore it down and used it for firewood, and they left the Coquina Bell Tower intact, because coquina doesn't really burn in the fire, I guess. So in 1777, the residents of Andrew Turnbull's colony of New Smyrna, they decided to flee the dismal conditions that they were in, and they walked 70 miles north on King's Road to St. Augustine. Now, it's got to be bad where you're living when you just pack up and walk 70 miles to the next town. There again, 1777, they couldn't just hop in the car and breeze over to St. Augustine. So, yeah, they walked. And it was a long, hard road to walk. The refugees that were indentured servants from the Mediterranean, a majority from the island of Minorca, were granted refuge by the British governor, Patrick Tonyan. The spiritual leader of these refugees, collectively known as the Minorcans, Father Pedro Camps, petitioned the governor for permission to use the old mission and village of Tolomato for its constituents, who were mostly Catholic. The petition was granted, and the grounds became the prime burial ground for the Minorcan colonists. The cemetery continued to be used as a Catholic cemetery by the Minorcans, descendants, as well as other Catholics, throughout various changes of regime in St. Augustine, from British back to Spanish in 1783 to American control in 1821. The cemetery was officially closed in 1884, along with a nearby Huguenot cemetery, which happens to be just catty corner across the road from the Tolomato. Another video coming up on that one later. But received two more unauthorized burials, those of Catalina Eusina Liambus, who died in 1886, and Robert Sabate, who died in 1892. In both cases, the family of the deceased were fined $25 for violating the law. I bet that fee would be a lot steeper nowadays. Anyways, like I say, there's a lot of history in this cemetery. The first bishop of St. Augustine, Augustine Fl, who died in 1876, was buried in the mortuary chapel at the back of the cemetery. Father Camps, who died in 1790, was originally buried at the Tolomato, and then moved 10 years later at the newly built cathedral. Felix Varela, a Cuban priest and social reformer, was buried at the Tolomato for 60 years until his remains were taken back. They were unearthed and taken back to Cuba. When I went in the chapel there, the guide that was there that day was telling us the story, and um, for a while there was two people buried in that tomb in the chapel, and the followers of Felix Varela, found out about it, and they were kind of upset, and they wanted him brought home to Cuba. And Father Camps, who was in there, he was sharing some space. So yeah, they separated him, and now he was buried over in the church, and now there supposedly is no one in that tomb that's in the chapel. Who knows? I haven't opened it and looked, and don't really plan on it. A historically significant early burial is that of America's first black general, George Bissau. I believe I pronounced that right, probably wrong, but he was a leader of the Haitian slave uprising in 1791. Bissau became in the twists and turns of international politics and a Spanish general. He was sent to St. Augustine in 1796 and the second highest paid official of the colony, and stayed until his death in 1801. His funeral was held at the Cathedral Basilica of St. Augustine, and he was buried in the Tolomato in a grave that is now unmarked. In recent years, the cemetery has become a place of pilgrimage for members of the Haitian American Historical Society and many Haitian diplomats, including Ambassador Raymond Joseph and others, who have worked to gain public recognition for our first black general. On June 27, 2011, an historic marker was finally unveiled a couple of blocks away at 42 St. George Street on the home site of General Bissau. Also buried within this cemetery are a number of Confederate soldiers, including some members of the St. Augustine Blues, the local militia unit which took possession of the St. Francis Barracks and the Castillo de San Marcos, and for the Confederacy at the beginning of the American Civil War. So when you see the picture of the 11 markers all lined up in a row, the picture of that marker is where those Confederate soldiers are buried. And it's kind of, when you're walking around in there, it's interesting. There's some cool things in there, but it's also kind of humbling in a way. Just to know the history and everything that has gone down there. So I'll show some more pictures and a little bit more video, and I will give you a rundown of some of the events more pertaining to the Weird Wednesday type of things that go on in the Tolomato Cemetery. So this first grave marker that's coming up right about here is a marker of a young boy that is, his name is James, and this marker is about 30 feet just to the left of the gate when you go in the cemetery. And the dates on it confirm that James was 5 years old when he passed away. And there's been tons of photographs and videotape from just people coming by, different ghost hunters, just tourists that are, stopped by the spooky cemetery. And I've heard stories, and they have pretty revealing photographic evidence of kind of restless spirits kind of running around in the graveyard. Who knows? Are they James? Who knows? Like I say, I've seen some strange things in there myself. Shadows and orbs and just strange things. And when I say orbs, I don't really mean orbs in my photographs or anything. I mean actual physically seeing balls of light floating around, and really strange, really, really strange. Another one of the more popular ghost stories is that of the Wandering Bride. There's a young woman that lived here in St. Augustine that passed away supposedly from some heart problems or something just a week before she was to be married, and her family requested that she be buried in her wedding dress, kind of as a tribute to her wedding that never happened. And a lot of people have reported seeing the apparition of a female figure in a long white dress wandering around the cemetery here. And pretty strange. Another place right around the corner from the Tolomato Cemetery is the oldest store, or oldest drugstore, I should say. Um, it, along with, part of the cemetery, um, it's been there forever. It's a drugstore. It used to be a real drugstore. And not many people know that it's actually was built on top of part of the Indian village or cemetery that used to be in this area right here. So there are, in fact, bodies buried under the oldest drugstore, and kind of all right in that area there. Who knows actually how many are completely there. There's a little chapel in the back, and that's where I've seen several times, seen orbs and stuff with my own eyes. Just strange weirdness. Um, so who knows how to explain it. But like I say, even at the oldest drugstore, just, several hundred feet from this area, a lot of strange things going on there too. Um, Indians, people have heard drums in the night, just all kinds of strange things. Is it your imagination? Who knows? Is it really restless spirits wandering around? Who knows? One of the things that was kind of interesting is, and maybe some of you have heard about it before, during the Victorian times, 100 or so more years ago, a lot of citizens were very afraid of being buried alive. And unfortunately, in the early days, that happened a lot more than you may realize. The lack of medical knowledge to determine life signs and whatnot. Some people were buried before their time. So a man named George Batson invented and patented the Batson revival device, what became later known as the Batson Belfry. You got bats in your belfry? Consisted of a bell that was mounted on the lid of the casket and a cord which rested in the hand of those dearly departed. And if for some reason they were buried before their time and they woke up in a box, they could ring the bell. Somebody could come get them. So there you go. A couple of little strange tales in and around the Tolomato Cemetery. Hope you enjoyed it, and we got lots more to come. There's the Huguenot. There's plenty more cemeteries here with lots of old, fascinating information. So stay tuned. We'll be back for more. Thanks for watching, as always. Take care, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.